The knock came at 9:02 a.m. sharp, not on a door, but on a country's sovereignty. Inside a heavily secured vault beneath Burkina Faso's Ministry of Natural Resources, technicians were preparing for the launch of the country's first state-owned gold refinery, the final component of Traoré's 5-year plan to cut foreign dependence and keep Burkina's gold, its soul, within its borders. Outside in the marble hallways, an unexpected convoy had arrived. At its center stood a man in a tailored navy suit and a crimson tie. Scott Bessant, the newly appointed U.S. Treasury Secretary, sharp, polished, and unapologetically direct. He didn't waste time. "I need a word," he said to the Minister of Mines. "This refinery, it's a problem." The minister blinked. "A problem for who?" Bessent smiled, cold and clipped, "For everyone who believes in a stable market. Gold shouldn't be hoarded. It should be circulated under supervision." Meanwhile, miles away in the presidential palace, Ibrahim Traoré was finishing a call with an East African leader. His new gold-backed trade alliance was gaining momentum. Less dollar, more dignity. Aid burst in. "Sir Scott Bessant is in the capital. He's at the vault." Troy leaned back in his chair, unfazed. "Let him walk through our walls," he said. "He'll learn this is not the house of cards he's used to." Back at the vault, Bessent was speaking with authority, surrounded by analysts and diplomats. "You're sitting on $3 billion in reserves," he said. "Let me be blunt. Those reserves are part of a global balance, and that balance is built on the dollar. You disrupt that, you invite consequences." The room went silent, but not for long. His voice broke through the tension. He had arrived. Wearing his signature brown officer's uniform, Traoré walked in quietly, his gaze locked on Bessent. "I heard you were interested in our gold," he said calmly. Bessent turned. "I am here on behalf of the International Financial Order." Traoré nodded slowly. "Ah, the order where you print and we dig." Bessent stiffened. "The United States has invested billions in maintaining global stability," Bessent replied. "If you want to operate outside that system, be ready for the storm that comes with it." Traoré stepped closer. "You said our gold still belongs to you," he said. "I'm here to tell you." He pointed to the sealed vault. "Come and take it." The silence that followed was volcanic. Treasury Secretary stunned. A room frozen. The rules had just changed, and the world was watching. Scott Bessant didn't flinch, at least not outwardly. But the phrase, "come and take it," echoed in his ears like a gunshot. It wasn't just defiance. It was a declaration of war against the very system he was sworn to uphold. The petrodollar world order, the IMF strings, the quiet grip of global finance. He straightened his jacket. "Let me be clear, Mr. President. This tone, this posture will isolate you. You'll face sanctions, suspended aid, frozen assets." Traoré walked slowly to the window of the underground vault room, gazing out at the rising sun, peeking through the concrete slats. He spoke without turning. "Sanctions," he said. "You already sanctioned our dignity a long time ago." A hush fell over the room. "We are done trading gold for debt," Tor continued. "Done sending wealth to the West and begging for loans in return. Burkina Faso is not a branch office of your treasury." Bessent crossed his arms. "And enjoy the consequences. Your trade partners won't touch you if the U.S. blacklists your gold." Traoré finally turned his voice lower but harder. "They will, because they're tired of asking for permission to breathe." That evening, the news broke across financial outlets worldwide. Breaking: Burkina Faso refuses U.S. Treasury demands. Continues gold nationalization program. At the White House, National Security Advisor Paul Rowley slammed a folder on the Situation Room table. "We told them this would happen if we let Tor grow unchecked." Now he's openly daring the Treasury on global TV. President Biden leaned forward: options. We freeze their accounts, cut IMF ties, pressure neighboring countries. And what about military? Leverage. Too risky. Russia and China are circling. The pressure mounted. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Tor's advisors gathered for an emergency night session. "This could break us economically," said Finance Minister Assata Sawato. "Our reserves are limited. If SWIFT access is blocked, we lose the ability to pay for imports. Traoré listened silently, fingers steepled. Then he said, "Let them freeze us. It will show our people that what they call international community is just a club for empire." "Then what's our next move?" someone asked. Traoré stood. "We break the illusion. Tomorrow, I'll address the nation and the world. Not as a beggar, as a man who owns what's under his feet." The next morning, cameras were set, flags unfurled. The speech was already being broadcast before Traoré even reached the podium. Bessent was watching from the U.S. Embassy, his phone buzzing with calls from D.C., and then Traoré appeared on the screen.com, firm, unapologetic. "We've been told our gold belongs to others, that freedom is a product with a price tag. Today we say no more. Our land, our wealth, our rules." Burkina Faso bows to no one. The crowd erupted outside the palace. Gates. From Nairobi to Brasilia. From Istanbul to Jakarta. The message spread like wildfire. And in the shadows of the embassy, Bessent turned to his attaché. He just declared financial war. By noon that same day, the retaliation began. Washington moved fast. Within hours of Traoré's speech, the U.S. Treasury issued an official statement. Due to destabilizing actions taken by the government of Burkina Faso, all transactions involving its national gold reserves are suspended under Executive Order 13,959. U.S.-based entities are prohibited from engaging in trade with Burkina Faso's central financial institutions. That same hour, Paris followed suit. So did London. International banks froze Burkina Faso's dollar-denominated accounts. Freight companies canceled scheduled gold shipments. Insurance providers withdrew coverage. The country's financial arteries were being cut one by one. In Ouagadougou's bustling central market, merchants were the first to feel it. "Prices are rising," one woman muttered, inspecting a sack of imported rice. "The traders say the ports are holding back goods." At the presidential palace, Tour's senior staff gathered again, grim-faced, exhausted. "The sanctions are biting," said Minister Savago, "but the people must not see us blink. If we hesitate, we lose credibility." Traoré nodded. "Let's stop reacting. It's time we act." His fingers tapped on a leather folder. "I want a list." He said all gold production companies operating here, their ownership structures, who profits, who exports, who evades, his voice lowered, and who reports to Washington. The room fell silent. Elsewhere, in a quiet private terminal at Ouagadougou International Airport, a discreet figure boarded a jet. American passport, diplomatic clearance, unmarked briefcase. Scott Bessant was leaving, but not before giving one final message to the U.S. Embassy. He's not just defiant, he's dangerous. He's lighting a fuse under the entire system. You stop him? Now, or you lose Africa. Back in Burkina Faso, a storm was forming. Political, economic, and psychological. Traoré was unmoved. He called a meeting with small-scale miners. Dozens of them, gritty hands, sun-worn faces, were ushered into the presidential courtyard. "You're the soul of this country," he told them. "Not the banks, not the foreign investors. You." He opened the leather folder. "We're building a new national gold reserve. It won't sit in Swiss vaults. It'll stay right here in the earth, or in our hands." He paused. "You'll be paid fairly. No middlemen. No foreign pricing. Burkina gold for Burkina's future." Applause broke out, not out of politeness, but from something deeper: pride, ownership. Later that evening, Tor stood alone on the roof of the palace. The skyline of Ouagadougou flickered below. The stars above burned like scattered embers. His aide approached. "Sir, are you sure about this path? The world is turning against us." Traoré turned slowly. "Then let it turn," he said. "We're not here to follow the world. We're here to rebuild it." And far away in Wall Street boardrooms, a new phrase began circulating. The Traoré effect: unpredictable, uncontrolled, unapologetic. A week passed. Burkina Faso was still standing, but barely. Fuel reserves dropped. Imported medicine shipments were stalled at the borders. The black market was booming and through it all. President Ibrahim Traoré stood unshaken publicly, at least. But in the palace war room, maps were spread out. Satellite images, dotted routes, patterns of movement. Defense Minister Ouattara pointed to the northern border. American drones have been flying lower, longer. That's not surveillance. That's pressure. And this? Traoré asked, gesturing to a cluster of circles near a mine in Shanaga. Private security? Wagner, maybe? But some chatter says former Blackwater operatives. Now under another name? Mercenaries, Traoré said flatly. Yes. And they're not here to watch. They're here to move something or stop something from moving. Troy narrowed his eyes. Weapons or gold? Could be both. Built underground vault in the Babalaso region. No coordinates were shared digitally. Only 3 men in the country knew the full route. 2 hours into the drive near Baromo, the lead truck stopped. A tire had been punctured, not by accident, but a spike strip. Ambush. Gunfire erupted. Contact front. Burkina Faso's elite responded swiftly. They pushed through, returning fire, flanking from both sides. When the dust settled, 3 attackers lay dead. One was unmasked, an American. Back in Washington, the White House press secretary dodged questions. We have no knowledge of any direct military involvement in West Africa. But in a Senate Intelligence Subcommittee meeting behind closed doors, the tone was different. We underestimated him, Bessent said, via secure video link. Traoré didn't just nationalize gold, he's militarizing it. Senator Graham leaned forward. What does that mean exactly? It means he's weaponized economic independence? If others follow Mali, Niger, Chad, we lose our grip on an entire region. And the response? Bessent's face was grim. We need a narrative shift. Paint him as a threat, a dictator, a destabilizer. And if that doesn't work, we might need someone inside to do what bullets couldn't. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, the national gold vaults were full for the first time in decades. Traoré stood before them, surrounded by engineers, miners, and guards. This is not just metal, he said. This is memory resistance. A message to every child born here. You were not born poor. You were robbed. The room fell quiet. We take back what is ours, he said. And if they come for it again, he placed his hand on the gold bar. They'll find we've learned to fight with more than weapons. 3 weeks into the sanctions, the world expected Troy to fold. But something unexpected was happening. Rather than collapse, Burkina Faso was adapting across the Sahel. Regional partners like Mali and Niger began quietly rerouting trade channels to Ouagadougou. Russian advisors offered technical assistance. A discreet delegation. And then came the offer that made everyone in the palace freeze. A private jet from Qatar landed under diplomatic secrecy. Aboard 3 men, 2 were economic envoys. The third, David Marcus, a former J.P. Morgan executive turned global consultant with links to multiple intelligence services, in the palace. Conference room Traoré sat across from them, hands folded. His eyes didn't blink once as Marcus leaned forward. Mr. President, he said smoothly, no one wants this to escalate further. My clients are ready to negotiate full restoration of access to global systems. In exchange, you agree to a structured gold partnership, shared oversight, gradual reintegration. Traoré said nothing. Marcus smiled, opening a tablet. Charts, projections, smiling Western diplomats. We're not asking you to give up your gold, Mr. President, just to share it responsibly. The world runs on trust. Traoré finally spoke. Whose world? Marcus blinked. The global. You mean your world? It's the one built on invisible chains? I'm not asking to sit at your table. I'm flipping the table over. You'll be isolated. No, Traoré said quietly. I'll be sovereign. After the meeting, Marcus was escorted back to his jet. That wasn't a negotiation, he said. It was a warning in a suit. What's our move? Asked Defense Minister Ouattara. We expose the deal publicly. Let the people see what their offers look like. No more back rooms. From now on, we fight with light. Across Burkina Faso, social media lit up as Traoré released footage of the meeting. Clips of Marcus saying, just share it responsibly, were spliced next to images of colonial exploitation.
Our golden, not yours.
Began trending across West Africa and across African diaspora communities in the US, France, and Brazil. Suddenly, what was a national crisis became a global story of resistance. In a Manhattan boardroom, Scott Bessant watched it all unfold on a tablet. "Damn it," he muttered. His advisor looked up. "It's not just about gold anymore. Now, it's about who controls the story." Traoré had changed the terrain of battle. Not with tanks, not with treaties, but with truth and just enough fire to make the world sweat. News of the leaked negotiations exploded across the globe. Paris protesters clashed outside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In Atlanta, college students held placards that read, "Burkina's gold, Burkina's rules." And in Ouagadougou, Traoré made his boldest move yet, called for an international conference. The Gold Sovereignty Summit, he announced live on state TV, hosted here in Africa. On African terms, the room behind him erupted in applause. But in Washington, it was anything but celebration. Scott Bessant slammed his fist onto the desk. "He's legitimizing himself internationally. If we don't act now, the next generation will grow up seeing him as a freedom fighter." "But what do we do?" one advisor asked. "Discredit it. Him, or better, trap him in front of the world." Back in Burkina Faso, preparations began. Heads of state from several non-aligned nations confirmed attendance. Media crews from Al Jazeera, TRT, and even CNN requested accreditation. Inside the palace, Traoré reviewed the guest list. "Bessent's name isn't on it," his security chief said. "He'll come," Traoré replied. "They always do, just not with their own name." Sure enough, 3 days before the summit, a formal RSVP arrived from the U.S. Treasury Department, a junior assistant secretary. But Traoré knew better. It was a mask, and Bessent was behind it. The Gold Sovereignty Summit opened in a refurbished colonial-era building in central Ouagadougou, deliberately symbolic. In the front row sat African leaders, economists, and independent journalists. The U.S. delegation entered last. Crisp suits and colder stares. Scott Bessant wore no name tag, but Traoré saw him, smirked. Then, as the cameras rolled, True stepped to the podium, and we, its owners, were left with empty vaults and broken promises. He paused, then turned toward Bessent's row. "That era is over. Today we reclaim what's ours, not just the resource, but the right to define its value." The crowd erupted, and if anyone believes we can't manage our own wealth, he looked directly at Bessent. "You're free to try and take it again." The next speaker approached the stage, but Bessent didn't move. He sat frozen. Traoré had just declared gold sovereignty on live global television with him in the room, and the world was watching. While the summit continued in the spotlight, the rail battle moved to the shadows. That night, in a heavily guarded section of the presidential residence, Traoré met with his closest advisors and a newly arrived ally, Seko Kababa, a forensic economist from Guinea, who had exposed French-backed laundering operations 2 years earlier. Kaba placed a folder on the desk. "This," he said, "is how they moved Burkina Faso's gold out for decades on paper." Inside were satellite-tracked shipment records, forged customs, clearances, and payment trails linked to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, all dating back to before presidency. Most of it was laundered through shell firms tied to Bessent's old hedge fund network, Kaba added. "They didn't just take the gold, they bet against your economy while doing it." Traoré leaned back in his chair. "And now they're back, offering to help." "It's not help," Kababa replied. "It's leverage." The next morning, a secret meeting was scheduled. Tori Kababa, the national prosecutor, and a team of cybercrime experts. Their plan to issue international warrants for 5 executives currently attending the summit, individuals directly tied to the laundering web. "If we arrest them now," said Ouattara, "it'll be war." "No," said Tor. "It will be justice and a warning." "Then we'll need proof strong enough to withstand international court," Kababa replied. "We already have it," Traoré said calmly. "I've been waiting for this moment." At 2 p.m. the following day, mid-summit, the national prosecutor held an emergency press conference before cameras from around the world. She declared, "Burkina Faso is issuing arrest warrants for financial crimes and unlawful enrichment involving foreign nationals and corporations. She read out the names: 2 Americans, 1 Brit, 1 Swiss, and 1 Canadian. Inside the summit hall, chaos erupted. Bessent's allies scrambled. He remained seated, jaw tight. Traoré entered the room slowly, confidently. "You thought this was about speeches," he said quietly as he passed by Bessent. "It was about exposure." Within hours, Interpol requests were submitted. Global banks began scrambling to respond. Checkmate. Washington was furious. Within 12 hours of the press conference, the U.S. Treasury issued a strongly worded statement accusing Burkina Faso of targeted, politically motivated legal aggression against American citizens. A veiled threat followed. If these arrests proceed, the United States will reassess all economic cooperation, including aid and trade relations. Scott Bessant, though cornered, wasn't done fighting. He convened a crisis meeting with European and American delegates at a luxury compound on the outskirts of Ouagadougou. "We've got one play left," he said. "Cut them off financially." He laid out a plan, freezing Burkina Faso's access to international markets, lobbying the IMF to delay debt negotiations, and warning global investors to pull out of West Africa's unstable zone. Will make Traoré regret this stunt. But back in the presidential palace, Traoré was already anticipating the backlash in the war room.